Welcome to Da Vinci's Discourse, where the minds of today's most innovative entrepreneurs are unveiled and explored. And my name is Kyle Campbell, your guide on this journey into the depths of the entrepreneurial psyche. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the minds of the greats. This is Da Vinci's Discourse.
So let's do it. Dude, it's a pleasure to
I
meet
don't
you.
know why in the world you would want to interview me, but okay.
Well, let's get into it. We'll discover that together. Yeah, so Will, dude, it's a pleasure to have you here, man. So why don't we get into you a little bit? What do you do? And more specifically, what do you love about what you do?
Well, those are not those are sort of far-reaching questions. Uh, I have a couple of strands in the DNA of my background. Uh, I started out being a journalist, an investigative journalist. Uh, went to Columbia School of Journalism, then, moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and covered uh, the Wake County public school system in Raleigh for 2 years. Um, Won some investigative reporting awards, um, and then moved back to New York, got my MBA from Columbia, and then went to Wall Street. I worked for the next 17 years. First, of all things, sort of financing leverage buyouts in the late 80s, and then becoming, M&A banker. Um, did that for, until 2004. I was at JP Morgan Chase, where I was the head of the telecom and media M&A group. So a relatively big job, but after 9/11, sort of the world of Wall Street kind of crashed for a while. I got fired along with a bunch of other people. I was in my early 40s, two young kids, didn't know what I was going to do. Um, uh, the people who fired me made it very difficult for me to work on Wall Street after that. And every time I would go for an interview, um, and got down to the uh, point where they had to, check your references or talk to your previous employer, they ended up effectively blackballing me.
Mm.
Um, just it's kind of nasty stuff. I, and I did nothing wrong. I was just there in a seat where I was getting well paid, but I wasn't in the room where they're making the decisions to fire people. So when you're not in the room, when they're making the decision to fire people, you're the one often who gets fired. So I couldn't get a job again on Wall Street. Didn't really know what I was going to do. But I came up with this idea of writing a book about Lazard, where I had worked for 6 years, which was a very interesting, it's kind of mysterious investment bank on Wall Street. Um, I wrote a book proposal, got a literary agent. Uh, she, we conducted a little M&A auction process, and I sold the book to Doubleday, and got an advance. It wasn't what I was used to getting paid on Wall Street, but it wasn't bad, and it was clear what I could do for the next 2 years. So I spent the next 2 years writing this book. Uh, it was published in 2007. It was a New York Times bestseller. I won the 2007 Business Book of the Year award, given by the Financial Times and Goldman Sachs, uh, which I think surprised pretty much everybody, including me, uh, and my wife and my kids. After that, I was called by Graydon Carter, who was then the editor of Vanity Fair, um, and like you, a fellow Canadian. And he said, "Did I want to write for Vanity Fair?" I said, "Sure." I wrote for Vanity Fair for the next 13 years. I've now written 7 books, most of them bestsellers, not all of them. 2 years ago, I left Vanity Fair and was one of the founding partners of Puck, which is sort of a digital magazine where the journalists have equity in the company. And now I'm working on, my 8th book. Uh, so, and writing for Puck and doing all sorts of other things. So it's
Wow,
been
man. Eclectic
been
background.
eclectic background. Didn't know didn't know where my career was going to go at any point. But I sort of took it as it came, and when I had setbacks, and there were plenty of setbacks, I somehow managed to pick myself up and keep going and try to get what I wanted to achieve. And I think at this point, have kind of a perfect life. I don't have a boss, which is after getting fired by my bosses at JP Morgan Chase, I certainly didn't want to have a boss again. So
It's
writing books,
traumatic, eh? Traumatic experience for you at JP Morgan.
extremely traumatic, very,
Yeah.
very unfortunate, and cruel and callous too, and unwarranted. But other than that, Kyle, it was great. Uh, and so now I don't have a boss. I can do what I want. I can do a lot of writing and have good editors, and I can be where I want. As long as there's an internet connection, I'm good.
Hey, that's what I always say too. I love that, man. What's the eighth book about right now?
The 8th book is about this big investment firm in the U.S. called Apollo Global Management, which was started by a bunch of ex-Drexel guys. So it's the story of Leon Black and Apollo, which is really fascinating. So
Oh, interesting,
I'm
man.
sure
So
it'll
when it
love
comes
it.
to getting a best-selling or a New York Times bestseller, what are some of the lessons that you learned in that process? What would you attribute that success to?
Good luck. Good
Ah,
luck.
it happens like that, eh?
Well, obviously, you have to have look, there are many different ways people get bestsellers. And it's harder now than it used to be because once upon a time they would have 25 books on the bestseller list. Now they only have 15. Not sure why they did that. It's kind of an annoying thing that they did. So it's harder now to get a bestseller than it used to be. But you have to have a good story, well told, and you know, I think you have to choose well what topic you want to write a book about. If you're, a nonfiction
Mm,
writer like I am, you have to choose a topic that people who buy books want to read, essentially.
yeah, right.
Not to be too crass and commercial about it, but obviously, my background is on Wall Street. I have a lot of connections on Wall Street. So, I haven't written all my books about Wall Street, but a lot of my books have been about Wall Street or finance. And, you know, good news is people on Wall Street have the money to buy books, and they do. And they like reading about themselves, and they like reading about people they competed against and knew, or, my second book was about the collapse of Bear Stearns and what happened, and people want to know about what happened. So, but writing a book is not easy. I don't have anybody working with me or for me. I do it all myself. I do all the interviewing myself. I do all the reporting myself, all the research, and of course all the writing. And so it's very labor intensive. You can't leverage it. You can't scale it. It's extremely bespoke. I'm pretty sure AI can't do anything. I'm not really worried about AI, which is nice. Um, but it's very labor intensive, and it doesn't get any easier. So I don't know how much more I can do this, but we'll see.
You say you're not worried about AI with it. Why?
because everything I do involves uh, either human interaction or the human brain and creativity and making choices and you know figuring out what's important from what's not and telling a good story. And I just don't think a computer can do that, even if they suck up as they have, my content without compensating me, which really pissed me off. I wrote a Washington Post op-ed about that a few months ago. And I think it's an outrage that, these big tech companies, suck up other people's content without consulting them or compensating them for it. And they get richer and richer, and people who actually created this stuff don't get rewarded for what they did. So that needs to change, although I don't know how it will. um no, so I'm not worried about it. I don't give it a thought. And
Hmm.
maybe by the time a machine can write a book like I do, I'll be dead anyway, so it won't matter.
Maybe, man. I don't know. We run a publishing company. One of the things that we do is AI publishing. So we'll interview people. We use that transcription to turn that into a book using AI. Now the writing's not up to your par, but it's getting there. And I think within the next few years, maybe, hopefully, it'll be at the same level where it's indistinguishable from a human writer. But you disagree with that?
Totally disagree with that.
Okay,
So
okay.
I
Have
mean,
you played around with
you
it?
can I have I have you know garbage in, garbage out. You
Right.
put in a few words and you say, write this for me, and yeah, it'll do it. Sure. It's lazy. It's lazy. It's intellectually lazy. It's inferior. It's to me, it's a load of crap. But I could see why people would want to use it or would want to think it's something worth their time, or why someone would want to play around with it, or why the people who are creating it create it. I mean, I think this video uh, version of AI where you type in some characteristics of a video you want and it spits out something that's interesting. I mean, that's sort of creative and interesting, but you know, look, I could be wrong. What do I know? But
Fair enough.
I'm
Yeah.
not worried about it. And you know what? If publishing companies want to just have AI writers do all their books, good luck to them.
Who knows, man? We've got no idea where it's going in the future, you know?
No
No
idea.
idea. Yeah. I mean, I wrote a book personally. I wrote it without AI before the whole AI buzz like last year, a couple years ago. And it took me maybe let's say 6 months of writing intensively and intensive editing and back and forth with the editors. And now we're able to create a book that's maybe, let's say, 80% the quality in 20 minutes. So it's an hour interview transcribed and then turned into a book in 20 minutes. And if we don't like it, we change it up. We just have it shoot it out a new one, you know. Right now, like I said, it's not at the same quality yet, but I think it will be. I don't know. The way that I see it working is we'll be able to generate stories and books and movies in real time for individuals who want to watch or read them. So the way I see it is the AI will scan your social media profiles, all of your online data, all of your books, everything it can get on you. And then it will structure and write a book in real time for you based on what it thinks that you will appreciate the most about a given topic. And in real time, it can generate a movie just the same way that the video is just recently been launched. I think this is going to happen within 5 years. But then again, same with you. What do I know, right? We have no idea what's coming, but I just see the progression with it. And I think that it's fascinating with how fast that it's progressing.
Well, look, I think there's always sort of different gradations in the market, different uh, uh, people want and will pay for different things. There will be people who, want a Ferrari and will pay for it, or want a Bugatti, or want a Lambo, or want a Birkin bag or something, or a nice watch. Um, you know, I'm not like a mass audience writer,
Well, come on,
you know.
you wrote a New York Times bestseller. That's a mass audience writing. Come
Well,
on.
it's not as mass audience as as you think. Uh, again, it's sort of a mystery what makes a bestseller, but I'm not J.K. Rowling. I'm not
Yeah, fair enough.
writing Harry Potter. I think I'm probably sort of a niche writer, just like there are niche, car companies. So again, I'm not worried about it. I'm old enough now that I don't care one way or the other at this point. I'm sure for one, two, or three more books or whatever I have left in me, the publishers will sign me up for those books. And if they want to also have a sideline of a twist of AI books that are just sort of churned out by the machines, God bless them.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, we'll see what happens with it, man. We've got no idea, but I want to get into a little bit the process of how you go about writing a book, because we're drawing on your background as an investigative journalist, and we're also kind of combining that with your experience on Wall Street. So your style of writing a book sounds interesting. I'm curious what your process is. So if I were to start writing a book with your style and your process, where would I start?
And you're gonna feed this into your AI machine and start selling books with my uh in my style. I'll be interested to see if that happens.
Possible. We do
First
that.
of all, you have to pick a topic that I find compelling, that I want to spend 2 to 3 years of my life researching and writing about. So that's the first step. Um, then you have to get your publisher to go along. So you have to engage your publisher, your editor in the process, and whether he or she will support you in this and basically hire you to write it. If you get those two things done, that's usually a high point, when you sign a contract with your publisher.
How do you,
Then you
we're
actually,
jumping ahead a few steps. How do we get the publisher to begin with? Let's say we've got the topic, we've found something that we want to spend the next 2 years of our life researching and writing about, which is a big task. I mean, you're committing 2 years of your life to something. So you found something that you want to commit to, something that you think would have a readership to it. Then what's the next step in terms of getting the publisher and getting the editors?
well, first of all, it's a job like anything. People, devote years to their jobs. This is just another job. It's obviously a creative job. It's a lonely job. It's you don't have a lot of colleagues you're collaborating with or working with. But you come up with a topic. Generally at that point, again, I'm fairly well-known writer at this point. I can then discuss the idea with my publisher. But I mean, you know, writers just starting out without a track record, probably would have to write a proposal. Essentially, if it's fiction, if you're writing fiction, you basically have to write the whole book and then get an agent, and then that agent will try to sell the book for you to publishers. With nonfiction, it's a little different. You can write like a 25 to 50 page proposal, i.e., kind of like a sample chapter. And if you have, I have an agent, but if you can use that sample chapter to get an agent. And if the agent likes what you've written, then the agent, will represent you in, trying to sell the whole book based on this little taste treat to, publishers.
Okay.
And, if they're excited, then there can often be an auction, there can,
Oh,
then there's like the art of selling the book to a publisher.
okay, fair enough. So we can get in touch with publishers just with a Google search and then submit the proposal, which I understand. What I don't understand is how you know what topic will resonate with the public, because we've started it off with what resonates with you that you're willing to research and write about for the next 2 years. But how do you know that it will resonate with the public? How do you choose that topic that you believe will sell?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's why you talk about it with your agent. That's why you talk about it with your publisher. Like not every book idea that I've come up with, my publisher agreed with. Sometimes when I want to do a book, and my publisher doesn't want to do a book, I have to move publishers. I've had to do that.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I, uh, other times I was I was in the middle of one book, and my publisher and I decided that I should drop that book and write a new book. And that's what I did. After Bear Stearns failed in 2008, I was working on another book. We decided to, you know, put that book aside. I never went back to it and wrote the book about Bear Stearns failing. Sometimes events occur
Right.
in your area of expertise. Obviously the financial crisis in 2008 was a kind of a once in a lifetime situation, unless you were born in the 1920s, um, like my father. You know, you just have to be opportunistic. You just have to say, okay, I worked on Wall Street. I'm an expert on Wall Street. I'm writing about Wall Street. Written one book that was a bestseller. One was named the best business book of the year. So, I'm highly qualified to write this book on what happened to Bear Stearns or what happened to Lehman Brothers or, you know, things like that.
Okay, so let's say that I have an expertise in something and a world event has happened that's created an opportunity for me to write a book about. Um, so you've been an opportunist, you capture this idea, you realize that this would get readership. Where do I start in terms of actually creating the book? Um, just putting the publishing and getting all of that, the business side of it done. What about the actual research and writing of it? Where do I start in that case?
You start in your head, start thinking about it, constantly. When you're on your run, when you're at the gym, when you're in the shower, um, you know, nobody's going to write this for you. Nobody's going to do anything for you. You can perhaps hire somebody to go collect articles, but generally the good news is now, like in the olden days, you'd have to go to the library and, go through microfiche to pull up old articles. At least now you can pull it all up or a lot of it up from the desktop, at home, which is really nice. But you have to figure out who's like, I write books that involve real people who are still living. So I have to figure out who it is I want to interview, begin to make connections to them, ask them if they'll agree to interview with me, and go from there. Do enough research on what's going on and what's happening, and uh, you know, start going about interviewing people in an intelligent way.
How do you know who to interview?
And well, it depends what your subject matter is, right? I mean,
Well, let's
you're
say that I'm
writing
writing
a
a book about the Wall Street or the crash in 2008. We're talking about
Well, I wrote a book about the collapse of Bear Stearns. So, my job was to go interview everybody I could, who would talk to me at Bear Stearns, starting at the top with the CEO and the board and, the various executives who made the key decisions and to tell me, to share with me what happened.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources, and you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast.
And, The good news is I've been lucky so far, and that most people I want to talk to for these books do agree to talk to me and share with me their stories.
It's a good networking tool. It's a good opportunity to meet people in high positions. Because you're writing about something that they're interested in, they get an opportunity to talk about it. They're looking for these opportunities anyways, and so it becomes a win-win situation. How do you go about
You would
capturing?
think it would be a win-win, but
Yeah,
if you're writing about the collapse of Bear Stearns, which is an 85-year-old
true.
firm that disappeared in the space of a week, it's not a happy tale. It's people did things wrong. That's why it happened. So you're going to tell a story of what really happened, and you're going to tell a story of the mistakes that were made. I interviewed Jimmy Kane, who was the CEO of Bear Stearns
Mm.
until close to the end, and I must have spent 10 interviews with him, 20 hours, 25 hours. After the book came out, and he never talked to me again. So is that good networking opportunity or bad networking opportunity?
Well, you get to leverage the fact that you interviewed him to get other interviews. It gives you authority and prestige in the marketplace. That's for sure.
That's true. I can use the fact that I was interviewing Jimmy, opened other doors. That's true. Um, but I don't really write books that are gonna make the people at the top particularly happy about what I'm writing about them. These aren't. This isn't hagiography. This is what really happened, and that's why I think the people who read my books read them is because they want to know what really happened, and I think they're probably counting on me to get access to these people to tell the story, but tell the story about what really happened and not about some sugar-coated version of it.
So let's say that I've identified some key players in a story that I'm writing, whether it be
Yeah.
fiction or nonfiction, absolutely in this case. So let's say that I've identified some key players and I want to connect with them so I can interview them, get the information that I need for my story. How do I connect with them? How do I get that interview opportunity?
How do you connect with me?
I shot you an email.
How would I connect with them? Shoot them an email, shoot them a text, you know, try the LinkedIn approach, which I think is clumsy, but yeah, talk to people who know them.
Right. Mm.
Talk if they have, a lot of these companies have, PR reps, and so you can talk to them. Sometimes the PR reps, you start making calls to some people, the word starts getting out that you're doing it, or there's an article about, you doing it. I've, had like articles about what my next book is going to be. And then people contact me and say, don't you
Mm.
want to interview this person or that person? Or the person themselves will call me and say, I'm happy to be interviewed if you want to. I think people, kind of like being part of a book project.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do, some people don't. It's sort of interesting. But I don't have subpoena power. Sometimes I wish I did have subpoena power. I'd like one subpoena power a year to get somebody to talk to me who won't talk to me. But other than that, I've had a pretty good. There's always some one or two people who won't talk to me for each book, and even those people after the book comes out have told me they regret not talking to me. So, but there's always one or two who won't do it for whatever reason. And
Mm.
guess what? That doesn't matter. Going to get written either way.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, people are looking for a way to tell their story and tell their point of view in the story, right? So that's what I mean by a win-win. Even if it was a negative outcome, they're still looking for an outlet to tell their story, maybe make themselves look innocent in the situation or what have you. And so they're looking for an opportunity to get out there with their message. And you're offering that opportunity the same way a journalist or a news reporter would. And you're just putting it in print so that
Right.
it's at a more of a longevity in the
There's
medium.
digital versions too. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
yeah, that's
Right.
right. That's some people want to participate in that, some people don't. and all you can do is ask.
How do you
But the
ask?
book's gonna get written either way. So
Right. Yeah, true. So and that gives leverage as well because you're not counting on them for the interview. It's like
you can
this is going to be
either,
written.
I like
You're
to
going to be a
say,
part of it or not.
I'm going to drive a car from, New York to, Vancouver. You can come along for the ride or not. You can sit in the back seat. You can sit in the front seat. It's a long trip. You may want to do some driving yourself, or you don't. You don't want to participate at all. It's up to you. I'm going from New York to Vancouver, whether you're coming or not. So, at the end of it, there's going to be a book.
So is that how you
You
position
either
it to the person you're
participate or not.
proposing the interview to? You're saying this is going to be written. I'm writing this book about this topic. You've got the opportunity to, I mean, like, how does that look
Yeah,
tactically speaking? What do I say to them?
sometimes I do that. Yeah, sometimes I do that.
Okay. So how do you
Sometimes
generally,
it
how do
works.
you think about structuring the messages that you outreach with them? So I want to, let's say I sent you an email. How would I go about sending you an email that's structured in a way that is going to make you enticed to do the interview?
I don't know. I don't give that much thought to it really. I mean, at this point, I've written, 7 books, and people, in what I write about, they know pretty much who I am. And, it was probably harder when I hadn't written a book before, but, now I think people who understand, what I write about, and what I could write about and will write about, know who I am. And so I say, the word gets out that I'm writing a book, about Apollo or whatever, and um, I start hearing from people. Or when I, ask the CEO to speak to me, somebody I'd known for a long time anyway, doesn't take long. I mean, I have his email. I'm doing this. Want to interview you, and these are smart people. They get it,
Right.
and they're busy people, and they don't have a lot of time for extraneous things, but I think they're clever enough and smart enough to know that it's going to be better if they participate and they get their input into what I'm writing.
What if you get a no? Do you continue to pursue them? Do you try to handle the
Sometimes I
objection?
do.
Okay.
Sometimes I've got stories where people kept telling me no, and then I kept pursuing them, and eventually they said yes. I've had people who just say no, and they keep saying no, and that's it.
How do you transition from a no to a yes?
Usually the way it happens is, a switch is flipped. Like, my third book was about Goldman Sachs. And for a long time, they had made the decision that they weren't going to talk to me. Yeah, like none of the executives were going to talk to me. And I think they were hoping I'd get hit by a bus, or that I would, not write it because they weren't participating. But, I kept writing it and interviewing people, and the word got back to them that I was continuing to do it. And then finally, somebody made the wise decision to stop resisting and to give in. And then all the doors opened.
The domino effect kicked in.
Domino effect kicked in. Other time, my first book, which was about Lazard, as I mentioned, once the guy who owned the company, Michel Davive, said he would speak to me, um, everybody else except for Bruce Wasserstein said they would talk to me.
So
And,
that's how you
I
look
knew
at
them
it
all.
from,
I
because
worked.
well, you said you talk about it from the top down. So you start with the people at the top, because once you have an acceptance from one of those folks, then you're able to infiltrate the whole system.
Sometimes I start at the top. Sometimes I start at the bottom and hope it'll filter up to the top. Sometimes I start on the side. You know, my approaches and tactics change sometimes. Like, I'll just be in stealth mode for a year or so, where I'm just researching and writing based on what I can dig up without talking to anybody.
And you wouldn't use AI to help dig up that info. I
Absolutely not. Don't
don't
go
get it,
near it.
man.
Yeah,
I don't get it. It's
don't go
like,
near it.
well, I mean, I'm looking at it as you got a diamond mine in front of you and you're looking for diamonds, but you're thinking, oh, but it's just too easy. So I can't dig into that mine. I got to go look elsewhere.
I don't want to. I don't want to you know, there's been a lot of noise lately about plagiarism in this country. I don't want to get near that, risk that. I'm careful about and meticulous about where I get my information, and it's probably too easy just to, type a few lines into the AI and get it to spit out something, and then what? Look, I'm playing a very different game. I'm very, very bespoke, uh, handmade. I'm not looking for any shortcuts. My publisher isn't looking for any shortcuts. They're looking for me to, my people who read my stuff, is looking for me to, take the time to research my topic, uh, talk to all the people involved, the principals, interview them, get their feedback on what happens. And, there are things that happen in these companies and in these situations that an AI will never know about. So what good does it do?
Well,
Right?
it helps me
They're
do
in people's
research on
brains.
individuals.
You
Well, see, this is when it comes to getting the interview, what it helps me is not to get the information itself per se, but to get information about the person who I want to interview. So that way I can reach out to them with a meaningful and well-researched message at a level of which is at scale as opposed to having to do the research individually for each person. So it's a scaling tool for me.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I guess instead of looking at Wikipedia, you could,
Yeah.
or Googling, you can, yeah, I mean, there are people, I mean, I Google all the time about people or situations or, looking for documents or stuff. I could easily use AI to do that, I suppose.
Right. You
I
see,
mean,
so I'm
whether
starting to
AI
convert
can
you over
pop up
here.
documents.
I'm starting to
Well, can
convert you.
AI pop up documents?
What's that?
Will AI find documents for you?
Yeah, it'll give you the references. You can click on the links and it'll bring up the original document that it sourced it from. If, going back to the
No,
plagiarism thing, yeah.
no,
Yeah, I mean,
that's probably useful.
it's very useful, and especially if you're looking for people to interview, it can help you find the people to interview, people that you wouldn't have thought of, it make abstract connections that you wouldn't have thought to make, that will be able to paint the story at a greater detail that you wouldn't have thought that it could even go there. And it'll also help you research the individual and structure a message based on what that person is most likely to respond to, based on its research. Now it's not at that advanced level yet, but it's getting there. It's interesting what it's able to do now that it can search the internet. ChatGPT, anyways.
Well, if I were venturing forth into a subject matter for a book that I didn't know anything about
Yeah,
or
fair
knew
enough.
very little about, right? I mean, say I wanted to, write a book about, you know, NASA or the Apollo space program. I could see, just like going to AI and, educating myself about that or
Yeah.
some aspect, some, you know, but, you know, spent close to 20 years on Wall Street. I've been writing about it for 20 years. That's 40 years.
Huh.
I'm not, my memory's not as good as it used to be. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I think I probably can give the AI, not in terms of speed, but in terms of
Huh. Yeah.
wisdom and knowledge, and being able to separate the wheat from the chaff, because that's what I have to do all day long.
Mm.
What's important, what's not. And I think I can do that better than, you know, NVIDIA chips.
Okay, fair enough, man. So let's say I got the interview. How do you know what questions to ask to get the information that you need? How do you look at the questioning process? Because I want to dig into your investigative journalism a little bit because you're pulling from different threads of your past and using it in your present, which is interesting. You've got the eclectic background. You're pulling piece by piece from each one to be able to do what you're doing now. So how do you know what questions to ask when you're interviewing somebody?
Well, I'm telling a story, right?
Yeah.
Arc of the narrative.
Yeah.
So I want people to start at the beginning.
Mm.
what did your parents do? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What'd you study? How'd you get where you are now? And, and then I can begin, zeroing in on, what happened, that last week in March of 2008, when Bear Stearns went down the tube. Take me through it day by day.
Hmm. It's
I mean,
interesting.
these are
It's something
traumatic
similar,
events for these people. I'm sure it's
right?
seared into their memories.
Yeah, seared is the right word for that, no doubt.
So I'm just asking them to dig it up and share it with me.
It's interesting. The process that you take is similar to the process that I take in these interviews, which is I generally try to extract somebody's model of reality, extract their unconscious processes and bring them to the surface so that other people can do them too. So, for example, if somebody was thinking about writing a bestseller book, nonfiction, before watching this interview, they'll have a better understanding of the process to take because we walked through step by step, the same way that you would start chronologically with where their upbringing was and how they're at the position where they're at or how they got there. We went through that same process, but instead of it being about you personally, it was about your process for writing the story. Still chronologically, how you start from step A to step B to C. It's the same process. It's interesting how it's the same thing, just used in a different way.
You know, um, some writers, feel they have to write an outline and populate an outline and all that. I don't. I don't like to go down that path. I don't know how I want to, I take it. I know, I'm going on this trip, going from New York to Vancouver. I know pretty much how I'm going to get there. You know, there are certain roads that I know I'm going to take, but something could happen along the way, and I go a different direction, or I go a different route, or I go down a different path, or I talk to somebody I didn't know about, or investigate a situation that I hadn't previously known about that I dug up along the way. So, I don't like to be wed to a outline, which to me is just a waste of time anyway. I know I'm going on this trip and I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm going to end up. That I'm clear about. And so then it's just, you know, the meandering path you take to get there. I kind of let the reporting, what I discover along the way guide me.
Mm.
Again, I know who I want to talk to and I know basically what I want to write about. But, things always come up that I, didn't know about and are worth exploring and digging into and writing out. And, sometimes that gets cut out by the editors in the end. But I'm glad to have done it and I'm glad to have known about it and I'm glad to have, pursued that. My last book was about General Electric and, what happened to that company. And there were huge chunks of that book that got taken out. I wrote them, I learned about them, but, it was just getting too long. So we had to make some cuts.
How do you feel about that? Is that like chopping the arm off your baby? Like, is it difficult for you sometimes to learn and get attached to part of a story that gets cut?
I mean, you know, here's the last book. Look how,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like 750 pages. Okay.
Wow.
That's after being cut.
Hmm.
Sometimes I don't like it. And sometimes I fight with my editor to get it, to get stuff that I want reinstated. And guess what? It's my book and I win. But that might mean people say it's too long, I won't read it. I can't read a book that's long. You know what? All my books are long, so they're not gonna get that. If they're a person that doesn't read a long book, they're never gonna be a reader of my books.
Right. It goes back to
My
picking and
books are
writing to your
very
target
deep.
audience.
Yeah, my books are very deep explorations of a subject, an event that occurred. Like there's a dead body on the ground. How did it get there? That's what I'm all about. If you don't want to take the time to read that, don't. I don't care. Don't read my books. don't follow me on anything, don't listen to me, don't watch this interview. I get it. People are busy. They don't want to spend the time, they don't want to spend the money, they got other things to do. Good for them.
But you're not
The
going for
things
them. You're going for the ones who are interested intrinsically without having to be persuaded in any way. The ones that are genuinely
well, I mean,
curious.
I want them to
Yours is
know
the
that,
pool of research to
I
read.
want them to know the book is out there and that they can read it and it's available to be read and it's done and they can buy it if they want to. But I'm not gonna, and I'm happy to go on TV or a podcast or radio or whatever to talk about it. But either you come to it or you don't.
What was your most memorable experience with the being interviewed about a book that you've written?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I was interviewed, for 3 separate books by Jon Stewart on The Daily Show,
Hmm.
and that was quite memorable because every time that he interviewed me and the show appeared, you know, the book zoomed up the bestseller list. So,
Right.
as a writer, that's Jon Stewart used to be able to do that. I don't know if he's now back 1 day a week. I don't know whether he can still do that. The world has changed a lot. Everything is more fragmented. Um, so that's very memorable. If you're somebody who spends 2 to 3 years sort of in isolation working on a
Yeah.
project, and Jon Stewart's got an interest in it and he invites you onto the show, and you spend 10 or so minutes talking about your book, and people clap in the audience, and then millions of people see the show, and some of them buy the book, and they know it's going to go up the bestseller list, and they're telling you it's going to go up the bestseller list, and then it does. That's very thrilling.
Kidding. You talk about a dopamine rush, man. How did you get on the show? You said that he contacted you. He was interested in the topic.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, it sort of started where he was going to interview somebody who worked on Wall Street on the show, and I had written an op-ed in the New York Times, which I guess he read and
Hmm.
called me up. And I thought it was a joke. I said, "Really? Is this one of my friends playing a joke on me?" It was really him. We talked about it. He interviewed
Wow.
the person that night. I helped him. He obviously remembered me, and I think my publisher contacted him when my book came out, and my books came out, and he agreed to have me on. So, I helped him. He helped me. It's
Yeah.
great.
Badass, man. I love that. It sounds like you've
Yeah.
got a lot of connections that you've built over the years.
Well, we're all connected in various ways. I'm not a big social media person. I grew up in an era where you couldn't connect with people. There was no internet, there was no cell phones, there was rotary phones, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've met a lot of people. I've interviewed a lot of people, stayed in touch with some people. You know, you be nice to people along the way, and some people don't like me because I've written things about them they don't like, and so they don't want anything to do with me. Other people, like me and will talk to me, and some people talk to me because they figure it's better than the alternative, and it's a mix.
Do that, man.
It's always very interesting because it's a intellectual challenge,
Yeah.
keeps
True.
your
I mean,
brain humming.
yeah, definitely. You're not going to get to the top without making some enemies along the way, especially if you're writing about the negatives that people have done, or what they perceive as, and maybe the public perceives as something negative that's happened. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But it's a part of it, right? And I think it's
Absolutely.
important not to let it get to you, man. So, is there anything else you want to add in terms of like what else would you add for the writing process, for the publicity of the book afterwards? What do you want to add?
Uh, I mean, first of all, it's very hard work.
Right.
Can't automate it. There's no factory floor, right? There's not a bunch of colleagues here,
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
things for me. So it's very lonely, and, you know, you've got to be driven. You've got to be motivated. You've got to put your butt in the seat every day and do it. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You just got to keep marching every day. And incredibly, I've gotten to the mountaintop 7 times, finished it, books, got them published. The 8th one is on the way or in process. So that's number one. And number two, it's not enough to write a book. You have to sell a book.
Yeah.
You can bust your gut and do all that, what I just described, and get the book published, but, then you got to sell it. You got to use your connections to get yourself, written about, or on the, on TV or on the radio, whatever, to a podcast to, get people to know about it. On the other hand, it can be very rewarding because, it's your, if it does great, it's a very high beta profession. If it does great, you get a lot of, accolades, and, it's very rewarding. And if it doesn't do great, well, that's the way it goes. One bad review in the New York Times can crush 3 years worth of work.
Ah,
And I've had that happen.
Jesus, man. Yeah, no kidding. How do you get over those moments where let's say you're struggling through the book, man, as you're writing it, you're at a point where you're like, I don't know if I can finish this damn thing. I mean, there's highs and lows to it, the whole
There's
process.
always a point like that.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're just tempted to throw the thing in the trash and say, fuck off. I can't do this anymore. It's not working. I'm not gonna be able to finish it. How do you get through those moments?
How do you get through any difficult moment? You just push through. Push through the pain.
Yeah. I mean, what about the loneliness? It's a big part of it,
No,
man.
it's not. It's not that lonely. I mean, you just don't have any colleagues. I mean, I'm always talking to people.
Right.
So,
Okay.
um, interviewing people or not. Weeks are different. Some weeks you interview people. Some weeks you don't. Some weeks you're reading the transcript of the interview or listening to the interview and figuring out what is it you want to use. So you're always sort of, as long as you're using your brain and solving your problems and making progress, that's what it's all about.
Is what it's all about, dude. I love it. It's a big puzzle you're putting together, and you don't have the picture on the front of the box. So that makes it a hell of a lot more difficult. But dude, I appreciate you being here, man. Anything else you want to add before we take off here?
I think that's it. Got me to cough up a lot of stuff I usually don't talk about. So good for you.
It's been a pleasure, man. An absolute pleasure. So, my friend, thank you so much for being here.
All right. Good luck to you.
You
Thank
too.
you, Kyle.
Appreciate you, dude.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.